Aegon Targaryen was a warrior of great renown. He conquered Westeros with relative ease. Many believe his biggest accomplishment came during times of peace. The Iron Throne was forged with fire and blood, yet it became the seat of justice for all of Westeros. The bringing together of the Seven Kingdoms under one Targaryen ruler was at the centre of Aegon's policies as king. To do this, he included men from all parts of the realm on his council and at court. His former enemies sent their younger sons and daughters to court, and they were encouraged to see themselves as subjects of the realm and not just Westermen or Northmen. The Targaryens also brokered many marriages between noble houses up and down the kingdom, hoping such alliances would bind the realm together as one kingdom. Queen Visenya and Aneys took special interest in making these matches. Ronald Arryn, Lord of the Eyrie, married a daughter of Torrhen Stark of Winterfell. Lauren Lannister's son and heir to Casterly Rock married a red wine girl from the Arbor. Visenya managed to broker a double wedding between House Blackwood and Bracken, who had been rivals for centuries. A Rowan girl in Rhaenys' service found herself pregnant by a scullion. The Queen found a knight willing to marry her in White Harbour and another willing to foster the bastard in Lannisport. Although Aegon was king and had final say in all matters, his sisters Visenya and Rhaenys were his partners in power, with the exception of Queen Alysanne, wife of King Jaehaerys I. No other queen held as much power as Visenya and Rhaenys. At least one queen would accompany Aegon on his travels, whilst the other remained at Dragonstone or King's Landing, ruling in his place. Though King's Landing was Aegon's royal seat and had the Iron Throne installed in the Aegon Fort, he spent only 1/4 of his time there. Many of his days were spent on Dragonstone, the island and citadel of his ancestors, much preferring the larger space and better safety and history. The king was heard to say he even preferred the scent of Dragonstone's salt air mixed with the smoke and brimstone. Between the seats, Aegon spent roughly half a year. The other half of the year was set aside for real progresses, taking his court from castle to castle, guesting with each great lord. From Goldstown to Lannisport, Winterfell to Riverrun, Aegon would turn up almost anywhere, sometimes with up to 1,000 travelling with him. Aegon believed it was better to prevent rebellions than have to put them down. When asked about the reason behind his frequent progresses, the king famously replied, "A glimpse of the king in all his power, mounted on Balerion the Black Dread, and attended by hundreds of knights, glittering in silk and steel, did much to instill loyalty in restless lords. The small folk needed to see their king sometimes as well, and know they might have the chance to lay their grievances and concerns before him." Much of the progress was made up of feasts and hunting, as each lord set out to outdo each other. But Aegon made a point to hold court wherever he travelled, whether it was a lord's grand hall or a farmer's field. 6 maesters also travelled with him, to answer questions the king might have about local law and customs, as well as history. He was heard to tell his son Aneys a lord should know the land he rules. Through his travels, Aegon did learn a lot about his kingdom, as well as his people. His main priority was peace. Before his conquest, wars between the kingdoms were common. Hardly a year would pass without a war somewhere in the realm. Even in realms at peace, lords would settle disputes at sword point. The king put an end to that. Petty lords and landed knights were now expected to take their disputes to their liege lord and abide by their judgment. Issues between great houses were now judged by the crown. Aegon had decreed, "The first law of the land shall be the king's peace. Any lord who goes to war without my leave shall be considered a rebel and an enemy of the Iron Throne." King's Landing grew around the Aegon Fort, on and around the 3 great hills near the mouth of the Blackwater Rush. The tallest of these hills became known as Aegon's High Hill, before the lesser hills became known as Visenya's Hill and Rhaenys' Hill. The hastily erected Aegon Fort was not grand enough to house a king and his court, and was vastly expanding before the conquest was even done. A new keep was erected, all of logs, 50 feet high, with a cavernous long hall beneath it, and a kitchen made of stone and roofed with slate in case of a fire across the bailey. Stables appeared, then a granary. A new watchtower was raised, twice as tall as the old one. Soon the Aegon Fort was threatening to burst out of its walls, so a new palisade was raised, enclosing more of the hilltop, creating space enough for a barracks, an armoury, and a sept. Below the hills, storehouses were raised along the riverbanks, and much of the shipping trade from the free cities was now coming through King's Landing, rather than Maidenpool and Duskendale. Fish markets, cloth makers, custom houses all began to spring up. A modest step was built in the hull of an old ship, the second, twice as large, atop Visenya's Hill, with money sent by the High Septon. The rich lived in walled houses on the hillside, while the poor gathered in hovels of mud and straw in the places between. King's Landing was not planned, it just grew, and grew quickly. At Aegon's first coronation, it was still a village beneath a simple moat and bailey castle. By his second, 2 years later, it was a thriving town with several thousand people. By 25 AC, it had become the third largest city in the realm, with only Old Town and Lannisport being bigger. Unlike the older cities, King's Landing had no walls, as it didn't need them. The residents felt safe. With the king and the dragons, there was no need. Originally, Aegon shared this view, but after the deaths of Rhaenys and her dragon Meraxes in 10 AC and the attacks on his person, it made him question this. In 19 AC, pirates from the Summer Isles started committing daring raids near the town of Tall Trees, carrying off thousands into slavery. The tales of the raids greatly troubled King Aegon, as he realised King's Landing would be a lucrative target if raiders had the sense to attack when he and Visenya were away. So Aegon ordered the building of a ring wall as high and strong as those of Old Town. He gave the job to Grand Maester Gawain and Sir Osmond Strong, Hand of the King. To honour the seven, the wall would have 7 gates. Work on the wall began in 20 AC and took 6 years to complete. Sir Osmond was the 4th King's Hand. The first had been Lord Orys Baratheon, the King's bastard brother. Orys was Hand of the King till the Dornish War, where he lost his sword hand after being captured. When ransomed back, Orys asked his brother and friend to be relieved of his duties. He told the king the King's Hand should have a hand. A proper King's Council was not established until the reign of King Jaehaerys, but that doesn't mean Aegon didn't keep close counsellors. He consulted with the maesters of the Citadel at Old Town frequently. On matters of taxation, he consulted a master of coin, and often talked with the High Septon when it came to religious matters. More than any of these, Aegon relied upon the Hand of the King, and of course upon his sisters and wives, the queens, Rhaenys and Visenya. The King's Guard was established after Dornish Assassins attempted to kill the king during the first Dornish Wars. Aegon was only saved by Visenya's swiftness and Valyrian's steel sword Dark Sister. After that night, the Queen insisted the king had constant protection. Many put themselves forward for the King's Guard, and Aegon contemplated hosting a tourney to pick the most worthy, but Visenya would not hear it, not wanting to put men of uncertain loyalty next to the king. She would choose the guard. They came from every corner of the realm. Some were the younger sons, others heirs to ancient houses who gave up their inheritance to serve the king. One was a hedge knight, another a bastard. All of them were quick, strong, observant, skilled with the sword and shield, and devoted to the king. The names of the 7 were written in the White Book of the King's Guard. Sir Richard Root, Sir Addison Hill, brothers, Sir Gregor Good and Sir Griffith Good, Sir Humphrey the Mummer, and Sir Robin Darkland, called Dark Robin. Sir Corlys Velaryon was Lord Commander. History has confirmed Visenya Targaryen chose well. 2 of her original 7 would die protecting the king, and all would serve with valour to the end of their lives. Many followed in their footsteps, writing their names in the White Book, and donning the white cloak. The King's Guard remains a synonym for honour to this day. 16 Targaryens followed Aegon to the Iron Throne. They numbered amongst them wise men and foolish, cruel men, kind, good men and evil. If the Dragon Kings are considered solely on the basis of their legacies, the laws and institutions and improvements they left behind, the name of King Aegon I belongs near the top.